This will be the very first weekend that we will be open without masks and where people can come in without an appointment. And I must admit it's going to feel very strange to have the door open and people just coming up the stairs and experiencing the gallery again. Last year in the middle of the pandemic, we thought possibly everything would be over by January. So I had put a show together that we were going to call Reset, and thinking that we would just go back to normal. And by about December, I realized there was no way that we were going to have a show open in December, but more importantly, there was no going back. There was no reset button we were going to be able to push and everything would be normal again. So, I called several of the artists, Heidi and Grace and various other ones, to see what their input might be. And we'd all been very inspired by Amanda Gorman's beautiful poem during the inauguration. And I think what really inspired us was her energy, her youth, her just that she represented what we hoped our country would learn coming through all of these difficult times. And one of the comments that she had used at the end of the poem was to find light. So we all liked that, and we felt that that would be a good title, so we called it Finding Light. And it worked from a standpoint of what the artist does. It also worked for people who were thinking that they might have to totally approach what they do in a very different way, either with ideas or honestly because they had changed during this time period. Someone like Heidi Fowler, whose work you'll see throughout the gallery, just gorgeous work that she's done. Heidi has very much been exploring the idea of what we throw away and to make use of the things that others might consider trash, things we just no longer want to use and we just toss aside in the creation of her work. Now, she is an extraordinary craftswoman in terms of her use of all the materials that she works with. She literally does transform them. But I think the passions that she was feeling were even more ignited by what we were seeing, particularly the real discrepancies of what people had. Some people didn't have food, some people lost their jobs, some people didn't have housing, more people were getting sick. We just saw these differences, and she was already dealing with a lot of that in terms of climate change and environmental issues, but also just what we throw away. So I found that her work continued pretty much on the same track that it had, except that she had 2 daughters at home, was working at home, trying to coordinate it all. That has been impossible, for all of them. Others, changed completely. I got birds. Carol Rowan sent me this beautiful falcon. Grace Mitchell actually did a painting of a raven. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, why do you suppose I have these 2 birds here? And yet, what occurred to me was, did they all feel like they were in a cage? And did perhaps the bird, that sense of that freedom and that flight, appeal to them as something they wanted to capture? So you just would feel these little differences. I think also in someone like Grace Mitchell, there was a different energy in her work, a real tension. She has always, again, been someone who has had environmental issues as forefront, and always her work has been beautiful. She draws you in with beauty and then asks you to think about what we might be doing in terms of how we live in the world. But this time her paintings had an edge. You'll see them behind me. They're a bit darker. They're a bit more foreboding. They are, my ability to speak French is non-existent, but there is a phrase that I remember, j'accuse, I accuse. There's something in her work that is just making us look at these forests and trees and say, pay attention. And there's a series in the back that you'll see that are beautiful little paintings, and you could just simply assume you were looking at sunsets and all of that. And you may very well be. That may be exactly what Grace was hoping to capture. But if you stand back, you can't help but have the sense of the forest fires that we've had throughout the West, and the feeling that you were looking from above and watching that kind of destruction. So that edge is present in her work, and it's been fascinating. Ken Shiano decided to really move into different materials. The couple of pieces that won the Maryland State Arts Council Award downstairs just have a light inside of them that are breathtaking. It's part of a series that he had been involved in, and he's continued with that. But then I got these bears, these wonderful, they make you feel of the teddy bear that all of us had as a child, the little forlorn bear sitting in the corner in the nursery. In a million years, I never thought I would get a bear from Ken. And they are somewhat a self-portrait of what he was experiencing during this time. I have plans for a show that I'm going to do in January of 2022, where I'll ask each artist to pick that piece that reflects for them the time period that they went through, and might reflect some of the changes that they experienced. I've been very fortunate. Many of these artists I've represented for some of them 30 years. So I really have watched them grow. The photographer Michael Kahn is a prime example. I gave Michael his very first gallery show, very first time. I remember seeing his work and just being, I mean, he had it. It's a very similar story about even Mark Castelli. You know, Mark came to visit with me, gosh, again, almost 30 years ago. And I just remember him opening up his portfolio, and I thought, my goodness, this man has captured something I just haven't seen someone else do before. And it's just, you know, it's continued. I think he has mapped the Chesapeake through the faces of these watermen in a way that hasn't even occurred to other people. In this particular show, you're right. I have seen them all grow. I love some of the work that Katherine Cox is doing. Katherine, for years, when I first showed her work, did these beautiful drawings of things I would call shelters. They were the house shape. They were, well, actually, you can go on my website and you can see the wonderful little exhibit we did. The very first one that we did is a virtual exhibit, which was called Shelter, which we used those older drawings that she had to encourage people to, in fact, stay home, to really drive home the fact that this was a time to go within, to go into that sense of shelter. But before that, she had started, actually, I think I would not say any of the artists that I represent are what I would call political artists, but all artists are affected by what is happening in the world around them. And Katherine is an example. I mean, Katherine is my age, and my age we won't go into, but let's just say there. But I went through the women's movement. I went through the civil rights, you know, the protests, the early times. And honestly, I thought we did that. You know, we'd done it. I have learned on so many levels that we scratched open a wound, but we quickly let it scab over and we didn't keep at it. I hate to use that terminology, but we didn't. I during this pandemic, have been overwhelmed by the work yet to be done. And when Katherine started doing the paintings of the clouds that you'll see over there, these beautiful pencil drawings, it was because it was almost, she said, a sense of tumbling down the rabbit hole. What is up? What is down? Where's the world? Where are we? What is going on in this world? And one of her paintings is a drawing that she did called My Cry for Justice. And it's so powerful, the way this energy of these clouds and the sky. And it very much is that feeling of, how do I make sense of any of this? how do I make sense of the work that is undone and still needs to be done?